This is Neil Schneider for MTBS-TV at Vision Summit 2016. To my immediate right is Dr. David Levitt, CEO, co-founder, Pantomime Corporation. I hope I got that right.
You did.
And now, David, you have a wonderful and illustrious career even prior to the current excitement around virtual reality. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I was at VPL Research, the company that invented commercial VR as we know it in the early 90s. I created some of the earliest virtual reality worlds. Before that, I got my doctorate at MIT and was one of the founding team members at the Media Lab.
Now, if memory serves, VPL was founded by Jerome Lanier, yeah?
Lanier, correct.
And he's the one who coined the term virtual reality?
He's the guy.
Are you happy with that, or do you think he should have gone with something else?
No, I mean, yes, I'm very happy with it. It evokes exactly what we all intended, that there's something that seems like it's real but may not be.
So what happened? So may I ask what kind of work you did at VPL?
Sure. I joined at a time when we were just starting to get everything working. This amazing engineer, Chuck Blanchard, had created a system called Body Electric that let you draw data flow diagrams to create real-time worlds. And I had been doing something very similar at MIT. So I jumped right in and started adding things like, gee, there was no physics. When you dropped the ball, it just kind of floated there. So I put some gravity in, and I was maintaining several of the demo worlds. I was giving a lot of the demos. It wasn't a very large staff. And I did a lot of different engineering things. Pretty quickly, as we got involved in 3D sound with a few different products, I became the product manager for those. And we had our main product was the RB2, the Reality Built for Two, and it was a really wonderful time where our standard was our first product had been the Data Glove. And we really didn't have a virtual reality headset, but reaching in, we felt, was the most important, or one of the most important aspects of reality. The other one was consensus. So we really didn't want a single-user system as our base system. So we made the Reality Built for Two, and finally we introduced the headset. And a friend of mine coined the name for the product. Well, it's kind of like a headphone, but it was for your eyes, and we called it the iPhone. Later, but so I was there. My roommate was actually the guy who did the optics for the iPhone, and it was a small, tight-knit, extremely creative group that could sort of make a VR system out of anything that was available, and no one had ever done any of it before. So
rewinding back to VPL research, in your opinion, what were the big challenges in those days to make virtual reality successful? I mean, certain things we take today for granted, but back in the 90s, what would you say were the big issues?
There were so many. Sutherland and some people had made head-mounted displays before, so we had them as touchstones, but a lot of what we were doing no one had tried. Brilliant engineer named Mark Oberman, well, just getting the graphics to work was a huge challenge, and you had to have a separate silicon graphics machine for each eye just in order to begin to have enough power to render 3D with enough triangles and textures. Really, at the beginning there were no textures, very primitive. And the gloves, Tom Zimmerman, who was one of the original people at VPL in the mid-'80s, figured out that if you treated them right, that optical fibers would leak light in a way that lets you measure how much you were bending your fingers when you wove them into the glove. So this extremely high-tech company in Redwood City, Silicon Valley, had people knitting and sewing gloves of the right size. And heaven forbid, I'm giving a demo to Yoko Ono, whose hand is so small that no one could detect any of the finger bends. That's an unexpected challenge. Then the headset, then the iPhones, optics, the Fresnel lenses, which really didn't look as good as the modern lenses do, that are look so easy. Mike Teitel made something that worked, and the resolution was bad enough that you couldn't see how bad the optics were. But it worked, and it was in color, and Oberman took something out of a TV, out of a rich people's catalog from an airline, and said, "I bet I can find the NTSC signal coming out of this that goes into this tiny TV and replace it with our silicon graphics output." And that, it really animated us.
Have the fundamentals dramatically changed in the VR in the 90s compared to what we have today? And when I say the fundamentals, I mean like how the HMDs are put together. Like, is there a drastic difference?
Yes, I mean, we really had to invent all of it then, and there was no stereo thing that you could put on your face like a big screen, large screen phone or something that you could say, oh, that's creating these two displays, and I just have to program it in Unity. There was nothing remotely like that. There was a lot of original programming that had to happen, and you had to synchronize two eyes of activity. And again, there wasn't a Unity, so you couldn't take physics for granted. I literally had to put in gravity myself, and everything like that. It was fundamental in all sorts of ways. When you were in virtual reality in the early 90s, you looked like some perverted Barney dinosaur with this huge tail full of cables, one for the head with a Polimus magnetic sensor in it, one for the hand for the other sensor, the two video signals, and even if it was, it tethered would be a polite word for what you had to do to be in VR in those days.
Wonderful. So now we're in a brand new generation of virtual reality. And even before the products have launched, I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I think we're further off ahead than we were in the 90s. I don't know if you agree with that statement.
In some ways, definitely, and in some ways, we're actually behind VPL. There is no data glove, and when people go into virtual worlds, I mean, it's a little bit like John Perry Barlow's first experience in the songwriter who said, I feel like I had my everything amputated, because he wasn't in a world where he even had hands in his first visit to VR. We at least had the data glove and hands. In a typical Oculus world, you literally can only look around, and interaction and sharing were originally off the table. And really most VR worlds to this day are vivid solo experiences, and to a degree they're not nearly as interactive. We didn't have 360 cameras, so all of our virtual reality worlds at VPL were animated worlds, and you had to put the gravity in and so on, but they at least weren't playing back a recording. They were interactive in some sense. You could pick things up. Actually, a couple of patents that were granted involved having your hand turn into a kind of vacuum when you made a grip thing, so it would go, and then you'd know without having to move it first that you had successfully grabbed an object. All of those details, in a way, the modern VR world, well, the HTC has wands, and they're starting to get ways to reach in and interact. And one of Pantomime's main contributions is to figure out a way where you can use the mobile devices that we're already surrounded with to reach in and interact in the world. That becomes a key thing. I think what a lot of people have assumed is, oh, VR must be great for games. It's sort of a first-person 3D game thing, but without real controllers or hands, it's more like a single-person IMAX theater. And especially when it's playing back recorded 3D content. So Nolan Bushnell, who's one of our advisors, the founder of the video game industry, loves Pantomime because it's like, oh yes, this really is a 3D video game that you can reach into and interact with. That's what made video games get bigger than movies over only 30 years, is that they were engaging in this interactive way that a lot of 3D content shot from a fixed location that allows you to look around but not change the outcome very easily doesn't have yet. So in some ways, we're still catching up to what VPL did 30 years ago.
So I know you touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about Pantomime Corporation. So what does Pantomime do? So
we have a way of recruiting any existing device that a consumer might have into virtual reality worlds where you can see it, and if it's a mobile device, you can move it, and it moves both in the real world and in the virtual world, so that you can reach in, so that you can interact with other things, other objects, and other people.
So let's elaborate a little bit more. So if I'm wearing let's just use this as an example. You've got a Gear there, but let's say I'm wearing a Gear VR or a Rift or an HTC. But that's fine. But I'm not wearing it either, so that's okay. So what would Pantomime add to the experience?
So we add your hands. We add the ability to reach in and to interact physically with other objects. So you can if you've got a model of a surface, in this case it's a flat table, you can tumble it across the surface, and it tumbles across the virtual surface as well. I just knocked over some dominoes and they fell in a line in a physically realistic way. All those things would be hard or impossible to do if the head was the only thing that the user could move in the world. So it gives you a body. It also, and this is kind of important because it really defines, in some ways, the meaning of this conference we're discussing this at, the intersection of augmented reality and virtual reality. There's a tendency to treat virtual reality as entirely synthetic and as entirely viewed through a single head-mounted display, your head. If you have a computer on the table, if you have a mobile device in your hand, most VR systems don't know, don't care, and don't acknowledge it. And as Jaron very wisely used to say, there's an incredible temptation for people making virtual worlds or virtual reality to say, oh, this part of what we call reality doesn't need to be included. And when you say computers and mobile devices are on that list of things that don't need to be included, you're talking about the things that people interact with the most every day. So the 1990 view and the 2015 view are very different. And one of our mentors, my co-founder Don Hopkins, advisor at Maryland, Mark Weiser, is associated with the term ubiquitous computing. And his view was that shoving everything through one device and thinking of that as the complete world is a little dangerous, and it's a little bit naive, like someone from 115 years ago saying, oh, someday everyone will have a personal motor with pulleys running between every room. That's not really how ubiquitous technology enters our lives. It's really everywhere, and what's beautiful, I think, about what Pantomime does is it acknowledges that at the outset and says, okay, all of these devices have enough computing power to do graphics. They're all networked via Wi-Fi, and there's no good reason that any of them can't be included into the virtual worlds. If they're mobile, then seeing them move and being able to move them and interact in the world is this wonderful gift. And I started to realize that around the time that I was programming apps on the iPhone, and wound up doing some experiments and made an app called Invisibility that suddenly had so much built-in magic that even though it was very simple, it was suddenly the #1 paid iPad entertainment app at a time when most iPads couldn't even run it because you had to have the gyros. Now every mobile device has those kinds of gyros. Our first patent has granted, and a bunch more in the queue. And we've replaced these expensive Polema sensors and all of the cables that we used to have to suffer with at VPL. So, but you know, most important, you can interact and you can see in, and your computers, in our view of things, your computers belong in the world and should be able to see each other in the world. We should simply turn each surface that looks like a screen into a pane of glass in the virtual world and let you see through it. It's very handy when you're looking through the device you're holding. And swinging it as a paddle or moving it through the space, and so that's Pantomime's view. Every device in your environment, and fortunately there aren't that many brands of device, and we're at this Unity conference, and pretty much all of them are supported by their Meta platform, which, you know, if iOS and Windows and Mac are platforms, Unity is the first great Meta platform for 3D, and we're another layer of Meta platform that says, yes, let's run on all those devices, and let's have every device's appearance and shape and mobility be a part of that world too.
So what I like about this is, and I think you've touched on this a little bit, is that when you're wearing a head-mounted display, yes, I mean, you can use this as an interaction device, whether you've got a tablet or you know, something on the table that's linked to this, that, you know, it's part of that environment. You have that interaction feature. Yeah. But it goes above that, where you could have other people in the room, in the environment, using devices that they're not even wearing a head-mount display, but they can still participate.
Yes, and that's the beauty of the Pantomime approach, and I think it solves this key problem that's been discovered as virtual reality gets a lot of press, but most consumers can't reach it. There's still, you know, Oculus Rift is going to be a $1,600 expense, including the computer, and there's a danger that early on in the new VR-capable world, it will be elite only. And that virtual, you know, and that both makes it hard for anybody who's trying to make experiences or headsets or software to share them and sell them to anybody. But it also makes it so that it's only for people who have $1,600 for an extra entertainment gadget. And what I realized when in the early days of Pantomime is that wasn't necessary, and so the way we built it out is first with iPads and iPhones and Androids, and then yes, headsets are another kind of device that could be in the room that someone could put on, and it becomes an on-ramp to virtual reality where people can be looking through a smaller display, or have it up on a big TV, or have it in their hand, or have it in their have a mobile phone that they're reaching into a world into and looking through. Those are all valid ways to experience virtual worlds. And interestingly, the ones that are the most easily shared, where we can make eye contact while we're playing with them and we can both look at the same screen, aren't the stereo ones that you wear on your head that are, of course, all the focus of excitement and the thrill of virtual reality, where you look down and your heart jumps because the platform was pulled out and your nervous system is sure you're going to fall. Yeah, that's fantastic when you've got a 100-degree view that convinces you of that. But most of playing in virtual worlds may wind up being just holding a display in your hand and having the scene move. Virtual reality, after all, is about having a display whose motion is masked in a way by having graphics, 3D graphics that move to the left when you move the display to the right, and it looks real. That's not limited to head-mounted displays.
Now, one thing you see with a tablet like this, or smartphones, or other devices, they have, I'll call it orientational tracking. I mean, they've got gyroscopes, magnetometers, but they don't have positional tracking where it tracks the exact place and placement. Mm-hmm. So how do you compensate for that? Like, I understand there's some functionality there that they kind of compensate, but maybe you could elaborate. It's
not even a compensation. There are two different kinds of things. The Gear VRs are mobile VR. They do, and they're mobile in all sorts of ways. They're light, but most important, they don't require a camera to be set up or any kind of the Polimas, a magnetic station that tells you where the center of the world is that you're moving in reference to. The Oculus Rift has it. The Gear VR does not. The HTC has laser things in the ceiling. The cardboard headsets use only relative motion. And yes, if you're going to have a permanent or semi-permanent or something that you're willing to set up before you use it, virtual reality environment, then you'll set up that camera, you'll set up that thing. You may have, if you've spent $3,000 on an HTC, you may leave a room permanently set up with it. You probably will. But if you want to play on the subway or in the car or just sitting at your desk or turn around to someone else, not only don't you need that, but if I want to scoot closer to you, or if I'm in your personal space and I want to scoot back, or I don't want my position in the virtual world to have to change. It winds up being, in this early augmented reality things, it can be exhausting just to lean far enough over the table to have a one-to-one mapping between your physical space and the physical space in the virtual world. In a pantomime system, I can just stroke the screen with my thumb, and I'm closer to these dominoes, and all I have to do is move this closer to me, and I'm closer to these dominoes, or move it further away. That's a huge advantage. It winds up being that for a consumer experience, having the positions of the computers that you're interacting with being the most comfortable for you. Moving a swivel chair shouldn't have to knock over a bunch of stuff to my left, with Pantomime it doesn't. So it winds up being the lowest effort, most consumer-friendly consumer experience for VR.
So let me rephrase the question. If this was on a table,
yes,
and we were operating it on a table, would it have the knowledge of the table to know how to interact, between the table and the device?
It knows exactly. Yeah, in fact, it happens to be on a table that looks quite a lot like the table it's on. Yeah, it knows what kind of surface it's on. It's on a flat table, and you see a flat table under it, and that's the classic beauty of it. If I wanted to lift this, or if I was on the subway and wasn't on a flat table, I could still play this game and knock over those dominoes. And it's not clear what you would do if it was requiring absolute. You'd have to have a real table there, or you'd have to have some. When lifting it would only lift it off the table. That's not necessarily what you always want. We're finding that reliable interactive experiences taking the world with you. They're portable virtual reality worlds. In a way, mobile is overused because every one of these half of these devices call themselves a mobile device. This is really portable virtual reality where you take virtual worlds with you.
Now, okay, so what I'm gathering, it's a means of interaction. So far, so good, yes?
Yes.
So it's a means of interaction. You're able to take other devices, all kinds of devices, and have them in this virtual space. Either you're viewing them in virtual reality wearing a head mount, or even if you're not, you're able to participate in this virtual space with your devices
Yes.
and see how they're interacting.
Yes.
So for Pantomime Corporation, how would you describe the product itself? Like, what is it?
It's a platform that includes libraries and 3D models and algorithms that tell you how this device is moving when it gets these gyroscope and accelerometer inputs.
Okay. Come a little closer. Is it a series of plugins? Is it a software plugin that goes into an engine like Unity?
We haven't made all the decisions about it, but it may well exactly be distributed as a plugin that other apps access. Yes.
Okay, very good. And I take it developers would code around this platform. Do you have some ideas on the types of experiences you'd like to see with this?
They're unlimited. I mean, you can think of any casual game like a Angry Birds or Cut the Rope and picture the immersive version of it that lets you reach into a 3D environment and squeeze those scissors with your thumb on the screen or what have you. Knives for cooking, hammers for whacking a mole, so many very simple things, but also complex contraptions, or we've done we made a batting cage experience where you lob a ball by tapping the screen and then swing it, and it's very satisfying because the way we're doing the physics of paddling is sufficiently physically realistic that it's very natural, and you improve your skills, and that's the bottom line for why video games were so successful. So all the kinds of things that made video games succeed that are missing from virtual reality are achievable easily with Pantomime.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Very exciting stuff.
Thank you.
This is Neil Schneider for MTBS-TV at the Vision Summit 2016. We will, of course, be back with more. Thank you for watching.